Chapter 26. Since the great accomplishment of the invincible Vajra divine art a few years ago, Su Qin had not felt any significant improvement in his body. Even when he entered the Grade 1 Great Grandmaster realm, it was only a qualitative change in his internal strength and a slight strengthening of his body. This little enhancement, for Su Qin, was just a matter of time. But now, under the combination of the invincible Vajra divine art and the lunar body refining technique, Su Qin felt a long-lost transformation of his body. Whoosh! His blood surged, and the power of yin and yang constantly collided and offset each other, giving birth to wisps of gray aura that quickly integrated into every part of Su Qin's body. Even Su Qin's Grade 1 Great Grandmaster's internal strength is gradually becoming pure. Even in the depths of his eyebrows, the Golden Buddha began to emit a misty Buddha's aura, faintly echoing with his body. Internal strength and the body are originally one. A strong body can nurture internal strength, and pure internal strength can also nourish the body. After a few hours, Su Qin slowly stood up. Kachakot. Su Qin's body made the sound of bones colliding. Unfortunately, the lunar body refining technique must be used when the moonlight is at its peak. Su Qin raised his head slightly, looked at the gradually setting moon, and sighed. I'll come back tomorrow night. Su Qin returned to the handyman court. After a night of cultivation, Su Qin was not the slightest bit tired. Instead, he was full of energy. A Grade 1 Great Grandmaster has begun to dabble in the cultivation of divinity. Even if he doesn't sleep for a month, it would not be a problem. What's more, Su Qin is not without rest. In the process of body forging, his divinity is also nourished. In front of the scripture pavilion, Su Qin said in his heart, "System, sign in." Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully. Obtain the cultivation technique, Great Wisdom Palm. Great Wisdom Palm? A smile appeared on Su Qin's face. The Prajna Zen Palm was a unique skill of the Shaolin Temple. Only the heads and the abbot were qualified to practice it. It was a secret skill of the Shaolin Temple. It is said that hundreds of years ago, a holy monk of the Shaolin Temple used the Great Wisdom Palm to suppress a famous Grade 1 Great Grandmaster at that time. Although the main reason for this was a holy monk's terrifying strength, the Prajna Zen Palm was not to be underestimated. The next moment, all the subtleties of the Prajna Zen Palm flowed into Su Qin's mind. In less than a moment, Su Qin seemed to have cultivated the Prajna Zen Palm for dozens of years, mastering this lost art in his heart. After signing in, Su Qin roughly cleaned up the place and then went to the first floor of the Sutra Pavilion to read some strange stories collected by the Shaolin Temple. The scripture depository was divided into 4 floors. The second to fourth floors contained all kinds of unique skills of the Shaolin Temple. Disciples who want to go to the second to fourth floors must get the permission of the abbot or the court heads. As for the first floor, it was written by some eminent monks who went down the mountain or brought back strange stories. It had nothing to do with martial arts or Buddhist scriptures. Therefore, any disciple can read the books on the first floor of the scripture depository. Although Su Qin was a sweeping monk, he was also a disciple of the Shaolin Temple. Naturally, he could also read it. Just as Su Qin was reading an unofficial history book with great interest, a voice suddenly rang out. "Junior brother Zhenguan, you are here too?" A surprised voice came from the side. Su Qin looked up, put down the unofficial history book and said, "Senior brother Zhenji." The person who Su Qin was talking to was Zhenji, the patrolling monk of the demon-subduing tower. Next to Zhenji, there were several other patrolling monks. "I'm in a deficit of blood. The court head said that it's not suitable for me to practice martial arts during this time, so I ran here to take a look." Zhenji explained. "So that's how it is." Su Qin nodded slightly. At that time outside the demon-subduing tower, Zhenji's blood was indeed devoured by Shui, but because Su Qin interrupted in time, his foundation was not hurt. Otherwise, if Su Qin arrived a little later, Zhenji's blood would not be in a deficit, but sucked dry. As for the several monks next to Zhenji, they were in a similar situation. Although they were not devoured, they still suffered some injuries and needed to rest for a while. They chatted for a while, and then talked about what happened in the demon subduing tower last night. Sigh, it was really dangerous. That Xianxia was almost going to start a massacre, Zhenji said with a sigh. There was great terror between life and death. After Zhenji walked on the line between life and death, his temperament also changed slightly. Senior brother Zhenji, you were not in a coma at that time. Did you see the appearance of a holy monk? A monk next to him asked in a low voice. Hearing this, the eyes of the other monks suddenly lit up. At this moment, the deeds of a holy monk have already spread throughout the Shaolin Temple. Abbot Huiwen and the court heads did not stop it. After all, letting the disciples know that there is a grade 1A holy monk behind the Shaolin Temple can also play a motivating role. Appearance. Zhenji shook his head. I only saw a vague figure, and then I lost consciousness. Hearing this, Su Qin chuckled in his heart. When he appeared in front of the demon subduing tower, he covered his whole body with internal force. Except for Xianxia, no one could see his appearance. When the other monks heard this, they could only give up. However, although I did not see his appearance, I know the strength of a holy monk. Zhenji suddenly changed the topic and said, The strength of a holy monk? The martial monks blinked and asked with puzzled faces, Isn't Senior Holy Monk a grade 1 Great Grandmaster? He is indeed a grade 1 Great Grandmaster. When Zhenji said this, he paused and lowered his voice. But even among grade 1 Great Grandmasters, there is a difference in strength. For example, Daoist Zhang of Wudong Mountain's true martial lineage has suppressed the world for decades and can even ignore the imperial power. There is also the imperial teacher of the Meng Yuan Empire, who has the power of the dragon and elephant. He alone propped up the entire Meng Yuan Empire. Zhenji's expression showed a hint of awe. Whether it is Daoist Zhang or the imperial teacher, they are all peak grade 1 great grandmasters in the world, and they may even touch the legendary mythical barrier. In front of such characters, ordinary grade 1 great grandmasters are indeed overshadowed. Senior brother Zhenji, what do you mean? The expressions of the monks next to him changed slightly. Although they were very grateful to a holy monk of the Shaolin Temple, they never thought about the level of strength of a holy monk. For these monks, even an ordinary grade 1 is far from what they can look up to, let alone a peak grade 1 like Daoist Zhang and the imperial teacher. Although I don't know the strength of Xianxia, he was able to destroy the 108 Arhat formation in an instant. Even if he is not grade 1, he is not far from it. With such an existence, even if he really encounters a grade 1 great grandmaster, he still has some hope of escaping. Even if he can't escape, he will definitely experience a fierce battle. Zhenji exclaimed, but last night, Xianxia died so suddenly, as if he encountered an enemy that was far from being able to resist. My guess is that the strength of a holy monk who killed Xianxia is at least at the level of the imperial teacher and Daoist Zhang. When Zhenji said this, the monks looked at each other with shock on their faces. A peak grade 1 like Daoist Zhang and the imperial teacher? How is this possible? You don't believe me? Zhenji saw that the monks did not speak and became anxious. He looked at Su Qin, who had picked up the book again and was reading it with interest, and said, Chapter 27. Junior brother Zhenguan, what do you think? Is my guess reasonable? Zhenji glanced at the monks and then looked at Su Qin with expectation. Yeah, Su Qin put the history aside, thought for a while, and said seriously, what you said makes sense. Junior brother Zhenguan knows me. Zhenji grinned. Next, Zhenji chatted for a while and then left with the monks. It wasn't until they left that Su Qin whispered to himself, Meng Yuan imperial teacher? Daoist Zhang? Long before entering the Shaolin Temple, when Su Qin was still the family Su's third young master, he had heard of the names of these two. At that time, Su Qin only felt that these two people were very powerful. World's peak grade 1? A smile appeared on Su Qin's face. Although Su Qin doesn't know whether he is the world's peak grade 1, with the trump cards he has now, ordinary grade 1 great grandmasters are really nothing in his eyes. Su Qin even has a feeling that when he refines his body to the extreme with invincible Vajra divine art and lunar body refining technique, He is afraid that his body alone will be enough to suppress an ordinary Grade 1 Great Grandmaster. Since Xianxia escaped from the demon-subduing tower, the Shaolin Temple realized that there were loopholes in the demon-subduing tower and began to repair it. It just so happens that the demons in the tower have already been devoured by Xianxia, saving the Shaolin Temple a lot of effort. A year passed in a blink of an eye. During this year, Su Qin returned to his previous life. During this period, in addition to signing in everywhere, Su Qin mainly focused on the cultivation of invincible Vajra divine art and lunar body refining technique. I finally reached the limit. Su Qin slowly opened his eyes and sighed. Since a year ago, he discovered that lunar body refining technique and invincible Vajra divine art could transform his body again. Su Qin began this cultivation every night. Until now, the gray aura produced by the fusion of the lunar body refining art and the Vajra unbreakable force could no longer improve his physical body. Looks like even the fusion of yin and yang can't endlessly transform the body. Su Qin looked a little regretful. But now, I can challenge a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster with just the power of my body. In other words, even if I stand still and let a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster attack, the other party still won't be able to break my defense? Su Qin thought silently. If he only relied on the invincible Vajra divine art, even if he cultivated it to great accomplishment, he would only be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with an ordinary upper realm cultivator. In other words, a rank 3 martial artist. But now, Su Qin combined the lunar body refining technique with it, and his physical body had soared to the level of a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster. If Abbot Huiwen and the other court heads knew about this, they would probably be so shocked that their eyeballs would pop out. Can he challenge a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster with just his physical body? What kind of terrifying physical body can do this? Even the imperial teacher, who is known to have the power of the dragon and elephant, may not be able to do this, right? How can I achieve the fruit of Arhat? Su Qin got up, looked up at the disappearing moon, and muttered to himself. Over the past year, Su Qin has taken at least hundreds of divine accumulation pills to constantly nourish his divinity, but so far he still can't touch the bottleneck of the myth realm. There must be something that I haven't done to the extreme. Su Qin was not discouraged, because since his physical body has once again transformed to the extreme, he faintly felt that his Shoyuan seems to have been lengthened again. Generally speaking, the normal limit of a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster Shoyuan is 200 years. But at this moment, Su Qin's Shoyuan has directly doubled, reaching 400 years. 400 years of Shoyuan. It must be known that even if it is the real Arhat or a legend, the Shoyuan is only 500 years. It is almost the same as the current Su Qin. There is still a lot of time, I am not in a hurry. Su Qin thought of the Grade 1 Great Grandmaster Juku Sanren who died of old age in the Thousand Buddhas Hall. Although Juku Sanren was a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster, he only lived for 160 years before dying of old age. Although a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster is known to have a limit of 200 years of Shoyuan. But there are very few Grade 1 Great Grandmasters who can really live for 200 years. The vast majority of Grade 1 Great Grandmasters only live for 150 years before they have to die because of internal injuries. The next day, after Su Qin signed in, he passed by the Great Strength Hall. Suddenly, at this moment, a jade chariot slowly came. The jade chariot was extremely gorgeous. It was carved with jade and dark golden lines spread out. Ha! Su Qin stopped and his eyes fell on an old eunuch wearing a red official uniform standing next to the jade chariot. Although the old eunuch was bent and his aura was not obvious, Su Qin could see at a glance that the other party was a Grade 2 martial artist. Eunuch Hong, what brings you here? Abbot Huiwen and the court heads looked solemnly at the old eunuch standing next to the jade chariot. The old eunuch named Eunuch Hong slowly stepped forward and said in a sharp voice, Imperial concubine Li worships Buddha. She heard that the Shaolin Temple is the holy land of Buddhism, so she wants to cultivate here for a while. As soon as Eunuch Hong's voice fell, the expressions of Abbot Huiwen and the court heads changed. Imperial concubine Li? The Emperor of Tang's favorite imperial concubine? Abbot Huiwen instinctively felt that this was a big trouble. Why did Imperial concubine Li not stay in the palace and serve the Emperor of Tang, but come to the Shaolin Temple for a rest? Eunuch Hong. The Shaolin Temple's commandment does not accept women. If Imperial concubine Li is really interested in Buddhism, this poor monk can make the decision and give some Buddhist scriptures to Imperial concubine Li. Abbot Huiwen immediately responded. Although the Shaolin Temple was a major martial arts sect, it did not want to get involved in the internal affairs of the palace. Especially this Imperial concubine Li seemed to have a bad relationship with the nobles in the palace. Now that the Emperor of Tang was in his old age, the situation in the court was unstable, and the princes were fighting openly and secretly. At this time, if the Shaolin Temple accepted Imperial concubine Li, it would be like taking the initiative to take over a hot potato. Humph! Eunuch Hong sneered. This is His Majesty's handwritten order. The Shaolin Temple dares to disobey? After Eunuch Hong finished speaking, he took out a golden scroll and looked coldly at Abbot Huiwen. The Emperor of Tang's handwritten order? Abbot Huiwen was silent. If it was only Imperial concubine Li who wanted to recuperate in the Shaolin Temple for a while, Abbot Huiwen could use the Shaolin Temple to stop her. After all, Imperial concubine Li was just a concubine in the palace. Even if His Majesty doted on her, what could she do? But if it was the Emperor of Tang's handwritten order, Abbot Huiwen would have to be careful. The Emperor of Tang's handwritten order represented the will of the Tang dynasty's emperor. If the Shaolin Temple refused, it would be equivalent to defying the Tang dynasty's emperor. For the Shaolin Temple, which was located in the Tang dynasty's territory, this was not worth it. After a long time, Abbot Huiwen forced a smile. Since it is His Majesty's will, Imperial concubine Li, please come in, Imperial concubine Li. Chapter 28. Although the eye of truth could not see through things, Su Qin was able to clearly see the aura within the carriage. There was indeed someone sitting in the carriage. However, it was not one person but two. Furthermore, one of the auras was unstable. She should have been poisoned. Aside from the poisoned person, the other person's aura was very young. She was at most 10 years old. The poisoned person is Imperial concubine Li? Su Qin guessed to himself as a thoughtful look appeared in his eyes. Over the past 10 years, although Su Qin had not left the Shaolin Temple, he had heard the discussions of the other disciples. Quite a few of them were related to the imperial family of the Tang dynasty. At present, the Emperor of Tang only favored Imperial concubine Li. For this reason, he had not even summoned the Empress for many years. If it were not for the fact that Imperial concubine Li had only given birth to one princess, the imperial palace would have been thrown into chaos long ago. But even so, as the Emperor of Tang continued to grow older, the court was filled with hidden struggles. The various princes were already at loggerheads. Someone in the imperial harem poisoned Imperial concubine Li. With no other choice, Imperial concubine Li came to the Shaolin Temple in the name of worshipping Buddha. On the surface, it's to recuperate, but in reality, it's to avoid disaster? In just a few moments, Su Qin was able to roughly guess why Imperial concubine Li had come to the Shaolin Temple. In truth, for someone to be able to so brazenly poison Imperial concubine Li in the imperial harem, it was likely related to those nobles. Even the Emperor of Tang could do nothing about it. He could only have Imperial concubine Li come to the Shaolin Temple. From this, it could be seen just how chaotic the court had become. However, Imperial concubine Li coming to the Shaolin Temple to avoid disaster was definitely the correct choice. The Shaolin Temple was a major martial arts sect and had never interfered with the court. As long as Imperial concubine Li could enter the Shaolin Temple, she would basically be safe. No matter how capable the nobles in the imperial harem were, they could not reach into the Shaolin Temple. The Emperor of Tang himself probably knew that it was very likely that Imperial concubine Li would be rejected by the Shaolin Temple. Thus, he had specially issued a decree to protect Imperial concubine Li. It said that the battles in Jianghu are fierce, but compared to the palace, it's not even worth mentioning. Su Qin sighed with emotion. Inside the jade carriage, aside from Consort Li, the other person should be her daughter, the current princess of the Empire of Tang. Su Qin thought silently. If Imperial Concubine Li really came to the Shaolin Temple to avoid disaster, it was impossible for her daughter to be left in the Imperial Palace. Just as Su Qin was deep in thought, the jade carriage slowly entered the Shaolin Temple. For the sake of preventing his disciples from disturbing Imperial Concubine Li, Abbot Huiwen specially gave a bamboo forest to the side of the courtyard to Imperial Concubine Li. The Chores Yard was located in the corner of the Shaolin Temple, and the bamboo forest was even more remote than the Chores Yard. Aside from the disciples of the Chores Yard, it was impossible for any other disciples to pass by. Abbot Huiwen had considered everything very thoroughly. Since he had accepted Imperial Concubine Li, he needed to take care of her as much as possible. Otherwise, wouldn't he be trying to please both sides? Although Abbot Huiwen also realized that the Shaolin Temple might be in big trouble, there was nothing he could do. After all, he couldn't go against the Emperor of Tang's orders, could he? Ever since Imperial Concubine Li's group moved into the Shaolin Temple, the heads of the courts warned their disciples not to go near the bamboo forest. Especially the Chores Yard. The bamboo forest was right next to the Chores Yard. As long as they looked after the Chores Yard, there wouldn't be any problems. After that, Su Qin resumed his normal life. Although Imperial Concubine Li's group had joined the Shaolin Temple, for the Shaolin Temple, there was basically no change. Su Qin was even more so. He cultivated when he should, and signed in when he should. On this day, Su Qin was about to go to the Bodhi court to sign in. When he passed by the bamboo forest, he suddenly heard a clear voice. "Little monk, wait a moment." Su Qin turned his head and saw a little girl, who looked like she was carved out of jade, running over with a bang. "Benefactor." Su Qin looked down and said calmly. This girl was Imperial Concubine Li's daughter, and she was also a princess of the Tang dynasty. "You left so quickly." The little girl panted as she looked at Su Qin with her big eyes. "Benefactor, it's getting late. You should go back and rest." Su Qin naturally couldn't be bothered to have anything to do with the princess of the Empire of Tang. In Su Qin's mind, whoever dared to disturb his leisurely life at this moment would be killed with a slap. "I just rested." The little girl looked at Su Qin carefully and said pitifully, "Can you chat with me for a while? It's too boring here. I don't even have someone to talk to." "Benefactor. I also have something to do." Su Qin couldn't be bothered to waste time on the little girl and directly turned around and left. Only the little girl was left standing there alone. This little monk. The little girl wrinkled her little nose. No matter where she was, even in the palace, everyone who saw her was timid and uneasy. But Su Qin didn't have such a reaction. Instead, it seemed that he didn't care about her identity at all. At this moment, "Your Highness. Your Highness, are you okay?" A palace maid hurriedly walked to the little girl and asked in panic. "I'm fine." The little girl shook her head and suddenly asked, "Is Eunuch Hong powerful?" "Eunuch Hong?" The palace maid was slightly stunned and quickly said, "Eunuch Hong is a red-clothed eunuch personally appointed by His Majesty. He's a second-grade eunuch. Even in the palace, he's one of the top masters. How can he not be powerful?" Eunuch Hong was the eunuch who escorted Imperial Concubine Li to the Shaolin Temple. Over the years, if it weren't for Eunuch Hong, Imperial Concubine Li would have died countless times. In fact, on this trip to the Shaolin Temple, if it weren't for Eunuch Hong intimidating the thieves along the way, Imperial Concubine Li probably wouldn't have been able to reach the Shaolin Temple at all. "So it's like that?" The little girl nodded thoughtfully. After getting rid of the princess of the Tang dynasty, Su Qin once again came to the Bodhi court. "System, sign in." Su Qin said in his heart. "Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully. Obtain the pill, Spirit Concentrating Pill." Spirit Concentrating Pill? Su Qin's pupils shrank slightly. The Spirit Concentrating Pill was a legendary pill of the Shaolin Temple. One might not be able to refine even after hundreds or thousands of years. In the past decade or so, Su Qin didn't know how many spirit-accumulating pills, great returning pills, but this was the first time he obtained the Spirit Concentrating Pill. When a martial artist reached the first grade, if they wanted to advance further, they needed to nurture their own spirit. When the spirit was nurtured to the extreme, one would be able to condense divine will. Divine will had endless uses. It could interfere with external objects, investigate the surroundings, and even kill people from a distance. A first-grade martial artist could only be considered to have touched the myth realm bottleneck after truly condensing divine will. As for breaking through this bottleneck, one would need to rely on divine will, physical body, and inner strength. But no matter what, once a first-grade martial artist condensed divine will, it was equivalent to crossing over to a whole new level. In the pugilistic world, this level was called peak first grade. A first-grade great grandmaster was extremely rare, let alone a peak first grade. Any peak first grade had the potential to break through the myth realm bottleneck. And if one wanted to condense divine will, other than relying on time and spending hundreds of years to comprehend it, there was another way. Chapter 29. I didn't expect to get a spirit concentration pill? Su Qin was overjoyed, and a smile appeared on his face. Since stepping into grade 1, he didn't know how many spirit accumulation pills he had taken to nourish the spirit in his body. But the result was far from satisfactory. Although his spirit was steadily growing, he was still far away from condensing his divine sense. It seems that whether or not he can condense his divine sense doesn't depend on how much spirit he has. Originally, Su Qin was prepared to spend decades slowly condensing his divine sense. But now, after getting this spirit concentration pill, Su Qin realized that it won't take that long. I can't rush. Before taking this spirit concentration pill, I should adjust my state to the best. Su Qin didn't immediately take the spirit concentration pill. Instead, he calmed down and considered the many details of condensing his divine sense. Although the spirit concentration pill can help a grade 1 great grandmaster condense his divine sense. But the most important thing is still Su Qin himself. No matter how heaven-defying this spirit concentration pill is, after all, an auxiliary effect. Moreover, in case something goes wrong in condensing his divine sense, causing Su Qin's divine sense to be damaged, the impact would be endless. If his body is damaged, he can slowly recuperate and take medicine according to the symptoms of his body. But if his divine sense is damaged, he can only rely on himself. Thinking of this, Su Qin decided that during this time, in addition to signing in, he would slow down his cultivation time a little to prepare for taking the spirit concentration pill. The days continued to pass unhurriedly. The lamp in the Shaolin Temple made Su Qin almost unable to feel the passage of time. The only difference from before was that the princess of the Empire of Tang seemed to be sticking to Su Qin. Whenever Su Qin passed by the bamboo forest, she would secretly follow him. Su Qin was in a good mood after getting the spirit concentration pill. If he had nothing to do, he would chat with the princess of the Empire of Tang to pass the time. In the process of chatting, Su Qin also learned some secrets of the imperial palace through the princess of the Empire of Tang. According to the description of the princess of the Empire of Tang, the emperor of Tang is really dying and can't hold on for more than a few years. The princes in the court have different thoughts, and the princes also take the opportunity to seize power. It can be imagined that once Emperor Tang really passes away, these princes will desperately fight for the position of the 9 and 5 emperors. Of course, this has nothing to do with Su Qin. Even if the world outside, Su, the emperor, the emperors est, test. Su Qin looked at the princess in surprise. T. Then what's your name? Su Qin asked casually. The little girl thought for a while and said seriously, I want Swu. Su Qin repeated. Yes, because I want to be a real martial artist. I want to control my own destiny. The little girl clenched her fists. Little monk, what do you want in the future? The little girl suddenly asked. What do you want? Su Qin thought for a while and said seriously, invincible. Pfft. The little girl almost laughed out loud. Invincible? Even in the imperial palace, the purple-clothed eunuch who was always by the emperor of Tang's side and intimidated all the ministers and princes with his own strength would not dare to claim that he was invincible. Time flew by. 3 months passed in the blink of an eye. Tonight, I can take the divine concentration pill. Su Qin sat cross-legged and swallowed the divine concentration pill in one gulp. The divine concentration pill melted in his mouth and instantly disappeared into his body. Su Qin was not surprised at all. The divine concentration pill's effect was only on the spirit. The body could not absorb the divine concentration pill. Inhale. Su Qin only felt the medicinal power of the divine concentration pills turn into a stream and slowly wrapped around his spirit, compressing and condensing it. Buzz. As Su Qin's spirit continued to compress and condense, an invisible mental wave slowly fluctuated in his mind and showed signs of spreading into his body. The next moment, boom, there was a sudden roar in Su Qin's spiritual plane. The divinity that was constantly being compressed almost condensed into a dot and finally exploded, turning into an invisible wave that swept out in all directions. This wave was invisible and intangible, but it was real. "I've finally condensed my divine will." Su Qin slowly opened his eyes. At this time, the world in front of him was different from the world he saw before. Within a radius of several hundred feet, every blade of grass, every tree, every flower, and every leaf fell into Su Qin's eyes. Compared to the insight of the eye of truth, Su Qin was able to completely control everything within a radius of several hundred feet with his divine will. "Let's see how far my divine will can cover." With a thought, Su Qin's divine will, which originally covered a radius of several hundred feet, began to slowly spread out in all directions. After a short test, Su Qin discovered that the best range for his divine will was a radius of several hundred feet around him. As for further areas, his divine will's probing started to become blurry. Continue spreading. Su Qin wanted to test the limits of his divine will. In an instant, his divine will turned into an invisible wave, like a wave of air, and instantly swept across the distance. During this period, his divine will swept through the chore's yard, the small hill, and even the bamboo forest where Consort Li lived. Within the bamboo forest, in an exquisite attic, Consort Li's face was pale as she lay on the bed. The heavy curtains fell, and from the outside, only a blurry figure could be seen. "Damned bitch." Consort Li's gaze was cold as she squeezed out these words from between her teeth. "Your Highness, please don't be angry." Eunuch Hong immediately said, "Although the devil's snare poison has been suppressed, it has not been eradicated. If your Highness is angry, it may stimulate the poison." As soon as these words came out, Consort Li closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, she said calmly, "I understand. How is the Shaolin Temple? Is there a threat?" Consort Li asked directly. "Rest assured, Your Highness." Eunuch Hong said confidently, "This old servant has already explored the Shaolin Temple over the past few months. Other than the back mountain and a few other forbidden areas, there is no threat anywhere else. The current Shaolin Temple's abbot, Hui Wen, is only a second-rank abbot. If he were to attack, this old servant can suppress him within 20 moves and kill him within 100 moves. Eunuch Hong said slowly, "Although the Shaolin Temple is a great sect of martial arts, this generation has already completely declined. The so-called Holy Land of Buddhism is just putting gold on its face." Eunuch Hong shook his head, his tone extremely contemptuous. However, the next moment, an invisible wave of divine will rolled over and swept through the entire attic in an instant. Consort Li did not notice it, but Eunuch Hong's expression changed drastically. "This is..." Eunuch Hong suddenly straightened his back, as if he had felt something extremely incredible. "Divine will manifestation? This is a peak grade 1 great grandmaster?" Chapter 30. Inside the attic. Divine sense rolled out and shrouded the area. Eunuch Hong's scalp went numb, and his mind was in chaos. As a red-clothed eunuch in the palace, Eunuch Hong naturally knew how terrifying a peak grade 1 who could condense divine sense was. Any peak rank, one would be able to suppress everything with a raise of their hand. Why could the Wudang Mountain true martial lineage ignore the imperial power and disobey the imperial edict? Why did the Meng Yuan Empire occupy the endless grassland and covet the central plains in the south? The terror of a peak grade 1 was far beyond everyone's imagination. Eunuch Hong never dreamed that the Shaolin Temple, which was rumored to have declined a long time ago, would have a peak grade 1. Eunuch Hong. Behind the curtain, Empress Li saw this scene. Although she didn't know what had happened, she was also terrified. Eunuch Hong was her trusted aide. If it wasn't for Eunuch Hong's protection, she would have died countless times. But now Eunuch Hong, who she regarded as her pillar of support, showed such a trembling and fearful expression. Empress, don't panic. Eunuch Hong calmed down and barely reacted. He bowed deeply to the empty air in all directions. This old servant Hong Yuan greets a holy monk. Eunuch Hong was very clear that although the peak grade 1 was not here, but under the cover of divine sense, all the movements in the attic were as easy as flipping the palm. After a moment, the rolling divine sense quickly retreated. Eunuch Hong heaved a sigh of relief. Eunuch Hong, what happened? Empress Li saw Eunuch Hong's expression and realized that the matter was probably over, so she quickly asked, "What happened?" Eunuch Hong smiled bitterly. "Empress, just now, a holy monk of the Shaolin Temple sent his divine sense over." A holy monk? Divine sense? Imperial concubine Li was stunned. Although she was the Emperor of Tang's favorite concubine, she didn't know much about martial arts. For Empress Li, she only knew that martial artists were divided into 9 grades, with grade 1 being the highest and grade 9 being the lowest. As for the rest, she didn't know. Empress, Eunuch Hong sensed Her Majesty's confusion. He pondered for a moment and said helplessly, "You only need to treat this a holy monk like Eunuch Zhao by His Majesty's side." Eunuch Zhao, Imperial concubine Li's heart trembled. To the people in the palace, Eunuch Zhao was second only to the Emperor of Tang. Even concubine Li only knew that Eunuch Zhao was the only purple-clothed eunuch in the Empire of Tang. His status was equal to that of a noble. Nowadays, the Emperor of Tang was in the old age. The officials in the imperial court all had different thoughts. Several princes were fighting both openly and covertly. But no matter how bad the situation was, as long as the Emperor of Tang was alive, the Tang dynasty would not fall into chaos. Why was that? It was because of the purple-clothed eunuch by the Emperor of Tang's side. This purple-clothed eunuch used his own strength to suppress the officials and princes in the imperial court. Imperial concubine Li never expected that Eunuch Hong's evaluation of a holy monk would be so high. He was actually the same as Eunuch Zhao? It was unbelievable. Eunuch Hong, with such a strong person in the Shaolin Temple, our safety. Imperial concubine Li suddenly thought of something and quickly asked in a low voice, "Empress, you worry too much?" Eunuch Hong smiled bitterly and said, "If a holy monk wanted to kill us, we would have died a long time ago. Even if the Emperor of Tang knew, he wouldn't ask." Eunuch Hong's expression was complicated. No matter how much the imperial palace doted on Imperial concubine Li, they would never get into a conflict with a peak rank 1 for a woman. "Empress, it's a good thing that the Shaolin Temple has a holy monk." At this point, Eunuch Hong paused and sighed, "At least we should be safe." "It's really amazing." Su Qin used his divine telekinesis, and various thoughts surged into his mind. However, the eunuch by Imperial concubine Li's side can actually sense the existence of my divine telekinesis. Su Qin was slightly puzzled. When his divine telekinesis enveloped the pavilion in the bamboo forest, the eunuch called Eunuch Hong had clearly recognized it. Su Qin muttered to himself for a while and thought of the reason. The main reason was that he had just condensed his divine telekinesis. When he released it, he could not truly control it. In addition, Eunuch Hong's mental energy was naturally stronger than that of ordinary martial artists. That was why he had discovered it. After some time, when Su Qin had completely familiarized himself with his divine telekinesis, he would be able to use it freely. A cool breeze brushed past his face. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, several months had passed. During this time, Su Qin returned to his normal life. As for condensing his divine telekinesis, it did not affect Su Qin much. After all, even without the spirit concentrating pill, Su Qin was confident that he could condense his divine telekinesis. It just took a little longer. And what Su Qin has the most is time. An ordinary grade 1 great grandmaster can live for no more than 200 years, but Su Qin can live for 400 years. With these hundreds of years, even a pig should be able to condense his divine telekinesis, let alone Su Qin. If I want to achieve Arhat fruit, divine telekinesis, physical body, and internal strength are all indispensable. Su Qin sat cross-legged, his thoughts fluctuating. Now that I have condensed my divine telekinesis, and my physical body has been tempered by the power of extreme yin and the power of extreme yang, reaching the extreme, all that is left is internal strength. Su Qin's eyes lit up. For any grade 1 great grandmaster, the mythical bottleneck is like a natural moat. But Su Qin was able to solve 2 of them silently. If this matter were to spread out, it would definitely shock the world. To some extent, Su Qin at this moment is definitely one of the people closest to the mythical bottleneck among the many grade 1 great grandmasters in the world today. The next day, Su Qin went to the Bodhi court to sign in as usual. Since the last time he obtained the divine concentration pill, Su Qin's sign-in at the Bodhi court has obviously increased. Since the Bodhi court was able to get a pill like the spirit concentrating pill that could condense one's divine sense, would there be a pill that could help transform one's inner strength? With this in mind, Su Qin walked towards the Bodhi court unhurriedly. Suddenly, Su Qin stopped. Soon after, the princess of the Tang dynasty ran over. Calculating the time, Imperial concubine Li and her party have been in the Shaolin Temple for more than half a year. But usually, Imperial concubine Li and eunuch Hong hardly leave the bamboo forest, so they did not affect the Shaolin Temple. In addition, Imperial concubine Li is under the orders of the Emperor of Tang, so Abbot Huiwen can only turn a blind eye. As long as Imperial concubine Li does not take the initiative to leave, Imperial concubine Li can continue to stay. For the Shaolin Temple, they only need to provide some vegetarian meals every day. Little monk, we may be going back soon. The eyes of the little princess of the Empire of Tang were red, obviously very reluctant. Although the Shaolin Temple is far less luxurious and spectacular than the Imperial Palace. But in the Shaolin Temple, she is at least safe and free. She doesn't have to worry about dying in a dry well one day or swallowing a cup of poison. Go back? Su Qin looked surprised. Yes, this is what eunuch Hong said. The little princess said in a low tone. Chapter 31. Little monk. Can I ask you a question? After a while, the little princess calmed down and asked cautiously. Go ahead. Su Qin asked casually. He has no interest in the princess of the Empire of Tang. After all, the little princess is only 10 years old, and Su Qin is not a copper alchemist. He usually doesn't even bother to look at her. Do you think the Empire of Tang can be saved? The little princess looked around and lowered her voice. Can the Empire of Tang be saved? Su Qin looked at the little princess again. Su Qin did not expect that the little princess would ask this question. If the little princess asked whether the Emperor of Tang could be saved, Su Qin would understand, but the other party asked about the Empire of Tang? Let's see how the Emperor of Tang will die. Su Qin thought for a while and said, if the Emperor of Tang establishes a crown prince before he dies, and exiles the other princes to stabilize the situation, the Empire of Tang can last for hundreds of years. Su Qin's tone was flat, as if the death of the princes was as simple as eating a few bowls of rice at noon. If other people heard Su Qin say such words, even the abbot would be shocked. Even an ordinary grade 1 great grandmaster would not dare to comment on the princes like this. But the little princess thought about it seriously and shook her head. Impossible, even I know that behind the imperial brothers, there are ministers and kings supporting them. Once an imperial brother is sentenced to death, it will inevitably cause the kings to revolt and the imperial court to be in turmoil. Then cut off the vassals and clean up the imperial court. Su Qin said slowly. When the little princess heard this, her expression changed slightly. The kings are independent and have their own troops. If they can really cut off the vassals, it will definitely be of great benefit to the rule of the Empire of Tang. Little monk, you see it very clearly. The little princess took a deep look at Su Qin. 1 month later, Imperial concubine Li's group bid farewell to Abbot Huiwen. When Abbot Huiwen received this news, he immediately escorted Imperial concubine Li out of the Shaolin Temple. For Imperial concubine Li to return at this time, could it be that something has happened in the Imperial Palace? The head of the Arhat court looked at the jade carriage that was gradually disappearing into the distance and spoke with a frown. This poor monk heard a piece of news. The Emperor of Tang's subordinate, eunuch Zhao, seemed to have used some means to prolong the Emperor of Tang's life by a few years. The head of the commandment yard whispered. The head of the Arhat Academy exclaimed in amazement, eunuch Zhao is truly a peerless scholar. As a crippled person, he became a top-rank one. How respectable! All right, there's no need to discuss the matters outside. Abbot Huiwen glanced at the several court heads and said in a low voice. With Imperial concubine Li's group leaving, the Shaolin Temple returned to how it had been in the past. Su Qin's surroundings became quiet again. However, several months later, one night, Su Qin suddenly felt something. His figure flashed, and he appeared outside the room of the head of the chores yard. His divine sense spread out. Although separated by a door, Su Qin knew everything in the room like the back of his hand. Under the cover of his divine sense, Su Qin clearly felt that the life force of the head of the chores yard was getting weaker and weaker. Su Qin was silent. The head of the chores yard was in such a state. He should be nearing the end of his life and about to pass away. The head of the chores yard had personally led Su Qin into the chores yard. If it were not for the head of the chores yard, Su Qin might not even be able to enter the Shaolin Temple. Head of the yard, Su Qin sighed softly, pushed open the door and walked in slowly. It's Zhen Guan. The head of the chores yard opened his eyes and looked at Zhen Guan. He smiled and said, I didn't expect that in the end, it would be you beside me. Head of the yard, do you have any wishes? Su Qin glanced at the head of the chores yard and asked, Wishes? The head of the chores yard shook his head and said, I have lived for almost 100 years. When I was young, I used to indulge myself with a sword. Later, I entered the Shaolin Temple and enjoyed everything. What wishes do I have? The head of the chores yard was very open-minded. As a warrior, even if he was facing the end of the Shoyuan, he would not be speechless. The head of the chores yard looked at Su Qin and said, More than 10 years ago, when you entered the Shaolin Temple, I knew that you were different from other orphans. Later, the family Su asked me to let you return to the secular world. I knew that you were not an orphan. You entered the Shaolin Temple just to avoid disaster. Su Qin was silent. Su Qin did not want to hide the fact that he was a member of the family Su. I have already told the abbot. If you really want to return to the secular world, he will not stop you. The head of the chores yard's voice was getting weaker and weaker. Well, you can go back. I want to be alone for a while. Okay. Su Qin nodded and closed the door. Outside the room, Su Qin did not leave. Instead, he waited quietly for a while. It was not until the head of the chores yard's breath completely dissipated that Su Qin turned and left. The next day, Abbot Huiwen and other heads of the chores yard came to the chores yard in person. A few days later, Abbot Huiwen found Su Qin in person and asked him if he wanted to return to the secular world. Obviously, what the head of the chores yard said before his death was true. He did mention to Abbot Huiwen that Su Qin wanted to return to the secular world. Abbot, since I have entered the Shaolin Temple, the worldly grievances have nothing to do with me. Su Qin refused righteously. For Su Qin, the Shaolin Temple was a treasure place that could provide him with a steady stream of magical pills and secret skills. Before he became invincible in the Shaolin Temple, Su Qin would not leave. After the death of the head of the chores yard, the days became slow and long again. For Su Qin, the death of the head of the chores yard made him feel a little emotional. But it was also because of this that Su Qin's desire to become stronger was even more aroused. If he stayed where he was, after 370 years, he would be like the head of the chores yard, facing the end of the Shoyuan and waiting for death alone. This was obviously not what Su Qin wanted to see. Time passed. A year had passed. During this year, Su Qin had been polishing his internal force. He wanted to make his internal force go one step further so that he could complete the transformation of his body, mind, and internal force. Finally, he could break through to the Arhat realm. Internal force is nurtured by the body. How can I achieve the final transformation? Su Qin kept thinking in his heart. The transformation of his body was completed by Su Qin using the extreme yang force of the invincible Vajra divine art and the extreme yin force of the lunar body refining technique for a year. The transformation of his mind was condensed by Su Qin taking countless divine accumulation pills to strengthen his spirit and finally condensing it with the divine concentration pill. But the transformation of his internal force, Su Qin still had no clue. In the past year, he didn't know how many times he had signed in at the Bodhi court. He had even signed in dozens of divine concentration pills. But he hadn't obtained any pills related to the transformation of his internal force. Maybe I should go to the back of the mountain? Su Qin turned his gaze and looked in the direction of the back of the Shaolin Temple. The back of the mountain was the forbidden area of the Shaolin Temple. It suppressed the Devil Buddha who almost destroyed the Shaolin Temple 900 years ago. In the past few years, as Su Qin's strength had greatly improved, he had basically visited the other forbidden areas of the Shaolin Temple and signed in at least once. Chapter 32. Originally, Su Qin did not intend to go to the back mountain. After all, in his senses, there was a faint aura of a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster in the back mountain of the Shaolin Temple. But since Su Qin condensed his divine sense, his grasp of his own body has soared again, and it is not something an ordinary Grade 1 Great Grandmaster can discover. Let's go and take a look. Su Qin thought for a moment and made a decision in his heart. Outside the back mountain, there are a large number of monks patrolling at all times, and the number far exceeds that of the demon subduing tower. With this level of defense, even a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster may not be able to sneak into the back mountain quietly. But for Su Qin, it is just a matter of taking a few steps. His divine sense enveloped his whole body, and his aura was restrained to the extreme. In a flash, Su Qin passed the patrolling monks and came to the back mountain. After entering the back mountain, his field of vision became a lot more spacious. Su Qin carefully sensed and walked towards the depths. This feeling... Su Qin suddenly stopped and rubbed his eyebrows. He doesn't know why, but the deeper he went into the back mountain, the more he felt that the golden Buddha, which symbolized the Buddha's palm inheritance, began to slowly emit Buddhist light. There is something related to the Buddha's palm in the forbidden area. Su Qin guessed in his heart that the Buddha's palm is the strongest divine art of the Shaolin Temple. It is known as the Buddha's legacy, but it was lost 900 years ago. And 900 years ago, in addition to the loss of the Buddha's palm, there was also a major event that almost destroyed the Shaolin Temple. The Devil Buddha's tribulation. At that time, Su Qin vaguely noticed that the loss of the Buddha's palm was related to the Devil Buddha. The Buddha's palm is a divine art at the level of art. Only by attaining the fruit of Arhat can one be qualified to comprehend the Buddha's palm. And 900 years ago, Arhat, the only one left in the Shaolin Temple, passed away in a hurry after suppressing the Devil Buddha. As a result, the Buddha's palm was not passed down in time. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated as he tried to recall the truth from 900 years ago. As for the Arhat from the Shaolin Temple, he only suppressed the Devil Buddha and didn't kill him. This means that Arhat was unable to kill the Devil Buddha and could only use such means to eliminate the calamity of the Devil Buddha. Su Qin thought as he walked towards the depths of the mountain. A moment later, 5 pale golden hills appeared in Su Qin's vision. This is? Su Qin's pupils shrank and a strange look flashed across his face. If one were to look at them from afar, the 5 pale golden hills would look more like 5 fingers that had been magnified countless times. His 5 fingers held up the sky and pressed down. Buddha's palm. This is the Buddha's palm. Su Qin raised his head and looked over. Although the aura of these 5 pale golden hills was not obvious, they actually began to resonate with the golden Buddha in Su Qin's primal aperture between his eyebrows. 900 years ago, the Arhat from the Shaolin Temple was the devil Buddha that was suppressed by the Buddha's palm. Su Qin was absolutely certain. If it were anyone else, even the current abbot of the Shaolin Temple, they probably wouldn't associate these 5 hills with the Buddha's palm. But Su Qin had the inheritance of the Buddha's palm. Although he couldn't use it, he was very clear about the aura of the Buddha's palm. So, Su Qin found 5 skinny figures sitting cross-legged in front of the 5 hills. These 5 figures were all dressed in monk robes. Their eyes were closed and their breathing was almost stopped. If it weren't for the faint aura leaking out, Su Qin would have thought that these 5 monks would have died long ago. These are the 5 a holy monk? Su Qin frowned. These 5 figures sitting in front of the 5 hills were indeed grade 1a holy monk, but their aura was very strange. Neither alive nor dead. They should have used a secret technique to put themselves in a state of suspended animation to prolong the shoyuan. Only at a specific time will they wake up. Su Qin guessed in his heart. Regarding the fake death secret technique, Su Qin has also signed in dozens of them. But without exception, once this kind of secret technique is used, the body will completely stiffen and lose the possibility of going further. In the state of suspended animation, one will have no thoughts, as if they have fallen into eternal darkness. This state is a tragic torture for anyone. Grade 1 great grandmasters would rather die in battle than let themselves suffer such pain. And the reason why the 5a holy monks in front of the 5 hills are like this is to prevent the devil Buddha from breaking free from the seal and forcibly holding down the fort with the body of a holy monk. Of course, the bodies of the 5a holy monks are far from being able to suppress the devil Buddha, but with the seal left behind by Buddha's palm, it is enough. Sigh. Su Qin sighed softly and sighed. The devil Buddha. Su Qin's gaze turned slightly and looked at the 5 pale golden hills. Under Su Qin's perception, although the 5 pale golden hills exuded an aura that suppressed everything, he could still feel a very deep demonic energy. Not dead for 900 years? Su Qin frowned. According to the records of the Shaolin Temple, even the existence of Arhat, or the existence of a legend, is only the shoyuan of 500 years. Since the devil Buddha has been suppressed, it means that he has not transcended the level of Arhat. Logically speaking, after 900 years, the devil Buddha should not even have ashes left. How could there still be remnants of his aura? Just as Su Qin was thinking. Wang. The 5 pale golden hills shook slightly. A monk in a golden robe appeared, looking down at Su Qin and said, Buddhist sect disciples can enter Buddha Mountain, obtain my inheritance, and glorify Buddhism. The voice was magnificent and deafening. If it was an ordinary martial artist, even a grade 1 great grandmaster, under this grand voice, they will be shocked on the spot, thinking that there is some kind of shocking inheritance in the depths of Buddha Mountain. Su Qin's eyes flashed with a strange color, and he walked straight into Buddha Mountain. After a while, Su Qin came to a Buddha cave. There were countless Buddha statues in all directions, and a strong majesty shrouded him. Since you are a Buddhist sect disciple, why don't you kneel? The monk in the golden robe appeared again. However, Su Qin didn't care. He still stood there, looking straight at the monk in the golden robe. Buddhism pays attention to equality, why should I kneel? Su Qin said casually. That's right. The monk in the golden robe seemed to think of something, nodded slightly, and looked at Su Qin approvingly. Under the age of 30, stepping into grade 1, your talent is enough to rank in the top 5 in the Shaolin Temple for thousands of years. Su Qin looked at the monk in the golden robe with interest. Who are you? My Dharma name is Pao, T'Arahan. The monk in the golden robe looked solemn and said calmly. T'Arahan is the Arhat, who suppressed the devil Buddha 900 years ago in the Shaolin Temple. Since then, no disciple of the Shaolin Temple has been able to achieve Arhat, Buddhahood. Pao. A smile appeared on Su Qin's face, as if he heard a joke. The monk in the golden robe frowned and was about to speak. However, the next moment, Su Qin's smile gradually faded, and he looked at him coldly, and said something that made the expression of the monk in the golden robe change greatly. Welcome to Legends of Cultivation audiobooks, where we bring ancient fantasy to life through storytelling. Follow the rise of heroes who defy fate, unlock mystical powers, and battle across celestial realms. Our audiobooks are crafted for fans of Chinese cultivation novels, filled with battles, breakthroughs, and legendary artifacts. Subscribe and be part of an unforgettable journey into the realm of immortality.